more. They have, Jessica and Jennifer have information to present, but also we can have a conversation. And they wanted to introduce themselves. I'm just going to tell you that I have seen both of them present, and we've talked a lot. We are so lucky to have them here. As you know, Bakersfield is ahead of us in doing guided pathways. They're doing it very differently than we are, so we get to hear about that and hear about how it's working for students. And when you they wanted to introduce themselves, which is good, so I don't slaughter Jessica's last name. But would you say how long you've been at the college, too? So, all right.
Do you want us to move to the visual, or is auditory just okay? All right. All right. My name is Jennifer Johnson. I am the department. I have to look and see who am I and what am I doing. I am the department chair for nursing. I am also the faculty co-chair for the curriculum committee. I teach nursing. I have been at Bakersfield College many, many, many moons. This is my 27th/28th year. So I'm excited to be towards the end of my career and crossing my fingers that they'll let me go. But I have enjoyed every minute, grown immensely, and am very, very pleased to be able to share with you today what we've learned and talk about our involvement and get as many people as possible on the pathway movement, because I believe in it.
And my name is Jessica Wojtyszak. There will be a quiz later to see if you can pronounce and spell it. I am a professor of academic development, which I understand Cabrillo College doesn't have a department quite like this. We're a little bit different in that basic skills is housed in a separate department. So academic development works with the lowest level math students, English students, and reading students, and I taught all three disciplines there. My master's is in English, but I have a strange undergraduate background. I'm also the chair of the Accreditation and Institutional Quality Committee, and so we're getting ready for our site visit next year, going through the ISER process now. Lots of fun. I have been at BC. This is my third year, so I'm still one of the newer kids on the block. So we definitely come into this with very different perspectives. I was hired at a time when Bakersfield College really was applying to the National Guided Pathways Project. And if you had asked me a couple of years ago, why do I support guided pathways, my answer would be, well, because I want to keep my job. But hopefully you'll see that my answer has changed substantially over the course of this presentation.
So before y'all start in, can we have everybody go around and introduce themselves so you know who you've got here? Well, you know the lovely Karina. Claire, what about you?
I'm Thorson. I'm in art studio.
I'm Anna Zagorska. I also have a Polish last name. I think pronounced it.
Yes.
I am the director of counseling, and I'm also one of the co-chairs of our Staying on the Path group.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for being here. My name is Christina, and I'm a counselor here at Cabrillo.
Jay Jackson from counseling.
And what word group are you?
Is it defining the path?
Yeah.
First pillar?
Sorry, wrong name.
Good job.
Yeah, nice job.
And I'm Becky Morgan. I'm a psychology instructor, our SLO coordinator, and one of the co-leads of our Ensuring Learning work group.
Hi, Gabby Rodriguez, math, and I'm a co-lead for the Redesigning Basic Skills group.
I'm Diego Navarro, and I teach at a program called Academy for College Excellence, and I'm a co-lead on the Entry to the Pathway group. Co-lead.
I'm Sarah Daub. I do curriculum and scheduling, and I'm on the Staying on the Path. Or no, I'm on Defining the Path.
Yeah, so
You're on it, Ella. Okay, so what we would like to invite you is at any point in time, we have slides. Any point in time, if you want to just stop and have a conversation about something we presented, this is very informal, this is how we operate, and this is how we would like this, we want this to be meaningful for you, not so much what we think you want to know. So our overview that we prepared for our time together is looking at our engagement strategy. How did we get started? A little bit about our first pillar process and bringing it all together. Looking at some data points and then lessons learned. And
we need a lot of advice. We need a
and,
lot of advice.
and you will know, we will leave the PowerPoint, so you will have this to review. We're being recorded so that you can go back and nitpick and find something, and definitely ask for more information, because this is truly an overview.
And we did give you our email, so feel free to just contact us directly as well. All right, so a little bit of background about what BC has done. I think the first thing that we kind of wanted people to see when we put together this timeline is to see that this is not something that happens overnight. BC has been kind of laying the groundwork for setting up guided pathways at least since 2013. And what you see, first of all, is a greater involvement of faculty and bringing faculty together to discuss data points and to get faculty to think outside of their silo, outside of their classes, outside of their department, and really think about that whole student experience. So things like getting involved in achieving the dream, having faculty gatherings where we would review the national scorecard, our own state chancellor scorecard, presenting that at College Council, urging those representatives, which is sort of our intersegmental governmental body, so it represents different committees, but also faculty, staff, administration, getting them to go back to their constituents and just having these conversations. Are we really happy with how our students are doing? Not just thinking in terms of how they're doing in our classes, because it's easy to say, I have a good success rate. I'm doing my job. But really thinking about what's happening to our students after they leave our course and move on to the next course. For us, there's a very large first generation population at our school, and it looks like you have about 40% is what I saw on the scorecard, first generation here at Cabrillo, getting a better understanding of the particular challenges that students who do not have family members who have experience at college, understanding what they're going through. We also really, so starting in the fall 2015, that's when I was hired, right, we started having discussions across campus of the book, so Redesigning Community College, which is authored by the head and the key researchers at the Community College Research Center out of Columbia. What does that mean for us when we look at national data? Do we kind of fit the data trends, the idea that students have too many choices, that they're spending too much time taking classes that they don't need, or they're bouncing from class to class because they don't really have a plan or know how to get to the career they want. And that really brought in new faculty seminars as well. So as new faculty hiring, we were reading that book, discussing that book, and working with the deans and members of our own departments. And then more recently, we started getting involved in planning summits, inviting other schools to come and talk about this. Our opening day celebration. So if you do opening day events where you start, before you start classes, getting faculty and staff together, talking about guided pathways, what does that look like? And then for us, I know you do it differently. We wanted to give you some idea of how we do it. We have completion coaching teams. So we have teams of individuals who are focused on particular disciplines and clusters of disciplines within that meta major, within that pathway. And they work with students who are specific to that major. So like I'm on the STEM team. Jennifer is on the health science team. And we have regular meetings with those groups. We've also started a communication team at the end when we talk about lessons learned. Don't put your communication plan at the end of this. You can start it a little earlier. All right, so a little bit about us, because very much as BC was getting involved in this, it was a matter of looking at the data. And the first thing we wanted to get a feel for is what is our student population like? What is our environment like? So we're an agricultural area, even though we're one of the 10 largest cities in the state. We're an area where we have half the bachelor's degree attainment of the state, but we have double the rate of poverty. Right, and so really starting to understand that what our students are coming from. And even though Bakersfield is a very large city, we serve Arvin and Delano and very rural areas as well, and the kind of the differences in cultures that are coming to the college campus, what our students know and don't know about college. And then we also started to look at demographics. So I mentioned poverty already. 2/3 of our students are on financial aid. Roughly 80% of our students are first generation. What does that really mean, right? As opposed to just assuming that our students know what college is and what it's like and what's expected of them, how to sign up for classes. Trying to challenge a lot of the assumptions that we have about our students when they come in. So we can move away from this, oh, our students aren't doing well, they're just lazy. To really asking them questions. Why are they not succeeding at the rates that we want them to do? What's happening? And how do we then change the school to fit their needs? It's the president of Sacramento State who always says we need to stop asking if students are ready for college. We need to start asking if our school is ready for our students. And that's something that BC spent a few years really, and it's something that we continue to question as we consider what we're doing under the Guided Pathways case. And then the business case, right? So when you're thinking about your colleagues who are skeptical about guided pathways, one data point that's really compelling is looking at your students and seeing how many units over are they going, that 60-unit threshold, right? And what's the cost, not just to the students in lost tuition, but to the taxpayer, right? Who's funding that? And we just did a simple calculation of 1 year, and we saw our students were on average taking 85 units instead of 60 units, with the 25 extra units for the students. That meant over $1,000 to the students that they're paying, but that adds up to over 20,000 excess units that are being taken, which is a huge multi-million-dollar cost to the taxpayers of our area.
So this is great. Our economics professor, Paul Harvell, did a calculation about what it's costing students over their lifetime in earnings. If they take
Nice.
6 years instead of 4 years to get their BA, it's over $1 million, he calculated, which in Santa Cruz would buy you a really nice house.
Nice, yeah.
So, yeah.
In Bakersfield, that even goes a little bit farther.
Yeah.
You can
Buy
get a
2 nice houses.
red.
So in addition to this, part of that is because they're losing their prime earning time.
Yeah.
In their life. So you could add that too.
And I know it goes without saying, but sometimes those extra 25 units aren't wasted units. They're really
Right.
important units
That's true.
that they need to do to really figure out what the right path is. But I know we are.
And
Yeah.
some
we'll
of
talk.
that, if you think about the 85 in nursing, we are a high unit major.
Oh, sure.
If you are prepared, you're not getting out to
No
60. I
way.
think it's
And that's
75
if
for
you know
us,
on
and
day
that's
one.
yeah.
Yeah.
And you can get your classes. So there's 2 caveats.
Yeah.
But in looking across, we have some where it's the average is 100.
Sure.
Okay, that's criminal.
Yeah.
At a community college, and that's to get the degree. And when they looked at some of those students and sampled those students, it wasn't changing majors and wandering and trying to figure it out. It was truly trying to figure out all the correct classes. So they were taking classes that they didn't need based on advice from somebody or no advice at all, coming to find out that it's time to graduate and now you need 5 more. And in the process, we've gone to an ADT, and so now that's changed. And then the CSU, so there's so many of those. So this is truly a sampling and an average, and we know that there are on these ends issues. And that's where me personally, I work a lot with students. I teach a pre-nursing class. I work a lot with the students while they're trying to figure it out. And my biggest pet peeve is, so who's helping you? And I'm dealing with first gen and nobody. And my friend told me, and their sister told me, and that's where that miscommunication. So I'm really on a rampage about, if I give you an SEP, this is your Bible. This is what you follow. I don't care what anybody says unless you come talk to me first. Because if they follow a student ed plan, I don't want to make counseling feel like they don't have a job, but it gets them on the path. And then I tell them at some point you need to meet with a counselor so that all of the ducks in the row are in the computer system, but at least you're starting correctly. And here's a great example of starting incorrectly. Often students come and they say, well, you need to take the health ed class because that meets graduation requirements. It's a good class to get you acclimated to college. You have a little bit of online work. You take the health education class. And for nursing students, it's waived. But they heard from their friend that was a really good first class to take, and it gets you a good entry GPA, but because they didn't talk about declaring that major, it's inappropriate. It's great for everybody else, but not my major. So it's those little examples that our students are being impacted greatly, and that's 3 units. While they're getting settled, it is a great class, but it's waived for us. So that accuracy of information, we talk about, those of you on the clarity pillar, we use the term ruthless clarity. And relentless. I prefer ruthless. Other people like relentless. But that is interesting. We probably have to do this somewhere.
It's all right.
I don't know where to do
It's
your
great.
relentless.
Yes.
We're doing Tai Chi. So great point. Great point.
No, it is, and in fact, when we met with larger groups, what we would do is sit people down in their major, and then they would get the specific data for their major, and then they could really look at that, right? Because it's absolutely true.
Groups of students?
No, faculty,
faculty.
and when we
And
got
counseling.
faculty, counseling, staff together to really sit down and look at this. Because of course, faculty and counselors are really smart, and they're going to say, well, these are students who changed their major. But when you look at the data, you see that that number of students is actually really small. That it's more students who are kind of, at least for us, there are a lot of students. So for example, Jennifer mentioned her SEP. We had a high percentage of students who were not doing their student, and they were literally taking, we have student development courses where they develop their ed plan. Do you have that here? Something like that, right? They would not take that until the end of their degree, right? Or it would be waived because they'd completed all of the other requirements. Now you don't have to take that, and that sort of backwards format really hurt our students.
Ruthless.
Ruthless, yeah. So what we have put together is a completion coaching community. So we've kind of jumped from what we did, what the data was at the beginning, to what we're doing right now, just to give you kind of an idea of some of the structural aspects of what we're doing. So the first is completion coaching communities. We have 10 learning and career pathways, so 10 meta majors. Each meta major has a cluster of majors, similar disciplines, and they were sort of grouped together over the course of really a year of faculty and gaining student input, getting a feel for how students understand certain subjects fit together. And then each of those pathways then has a collection of individuals who specialize in that group of students. And it's kind of a way of making the job more manageable, right? As opposed to, instead of 20,000 students that you're responsible for, you kind of focus upon the students who are in your meta major. So the dean is kind of the administrative lead, organizes the meetings, checks for outcomes. You have a data coach, which is something that not a lot of colleges do, but data coaches are volunteers, very often faculty, but staff as well, who get trained in the use of Cognos and other data gathering techniques. And so they report out and provide the data about their particular pathway. You have academic support services and more broadly support services. So things like the tutoring center, the writing center, there's a representative of that group working to tailor what they do to the specific needs of the students within that pathway. Then peer mentors, getting students involved, older students who have been through BC for a year, counselors, of course, and educational advisors. Discipline faculty, so those who teach, so for example, if it's the STEM pathway, you have the mathematics faculty, you have chemistry, biology, physics, astronomy, academic development faculty, so a remediation specialist who's involved in the pathway. Because very often the discipline-specific faculty are really good at knowing what students need to do for the major. They're hazier on what the remediation tracks look like, and especially since we've done a lot of changes through acceleration and changing our courses, it made sense to have a remediation specialist on each pathway and then a financial aid specialist, someone that the students are always directed to go to, for example, if they're thinking about dropping a class or if they're thinking about changing major.
This looks like a great structure, and I may have missed a beat, but, so this is a community that meets together, or, and how often are you meeting? And
It depends by the pathway. How often do you all
So
meet?
what we've done is we started, each one of these representatives has basically a job description. Nobody's assigned release time, it's just all, I want to be a part. So at this point, it's truly, I want to be a part. The completion, we did Pathways breakfast, and at the breakfast, they meet together. We have done those once each semester. This semester, we're doing one in a couple of weeks. But effective this semester, it's like, okay, you have enough information, you have the structure, we've kind of delineated all of the roles and responsibilities. Now it's up to the leads in terms of how often you want to meet. So my team, we have a conference call because scheduling face-to-face is going to be an issue. So we schedule a conference call on Fridays, usually at 10:30 every other Friday. And we canceled probably 3 of them. And when we talk, there's an agenda. We use SharePoint or Google Docs. I can't remember which one we're using. We place the agenda. We go through the agenda, conference call, talk it out, and then have a takeaway of now go and do this. So right now, one of the things that my group is working on is what we're calling it like a pathways course. So it's not health careers exploration. It's exploration for the health sciences pathways. And in my pathway, I have kinesiology, nursing, public health sciences, health information technology, and this course would be an opportunity to get students to do an abbreviated ed plan, take it right off the bat, very beginning, abbreviated ed plan, as well as begin to dabble and get information about any one of the programs in the pathway. And all of the pathways are to be working on their pathway-specific course. So we just are dealing out, like, look at the SLOs, provide feedback. When we come back together on the phone, we'll talk about it.
So I'm just wondering about that course. Is it co-taught with counselors and single faculty, or is it just
So here's where we are in the development. The last discussion I had with somebody, because I'm curriculum, so I said, let me tell you how this should be. But then I'll take the input. It'll be very different for each pathway. But for our pathway, what we're thinking is, one, bundling it with our summer bridge program, where the students come in the summer, take that half unit, and then we will create a unit and a half or 2-unit exploratory course. The discussion is to team teach it, so in curriculum development, in all of them, we will put the min-quals for all of the disciplines. It's going to look horrible, but that way, anybody who would like to teach it, because everybody doesn't want to teach it, anybody who would like to teach it could teach it. We're thinking of housing it in counseling as under student development, whatever that qualifier is for you. For us is STDB. But with everybody's min-quals, because min-quals, you can decide how you want that to be. So I could teach it, my public health science person could teach it, a counselor could teach it.
Sorry, just backing up just a second. So this course is for students who are choosing a meta major, and then they are taking a course that gives them a little bit of information about each area in the meta major.
Yes.
And they're getting how many units for it?
1.5 to 2.
And it's a first semester course,
Yep.
I assume?
Yep.
And that's even been a discussion that's come out of STEM, because we have so many high unit majors. Can we make it non-credit? Right, and that's non-credit. Right, and that's been an ongoing discussion. Could we somehow create, if we make summer bridge, the orientation over the summer non-credit, then could we link that then to the pathway course that would also be non-credit as well?
And you could mirror it so that you could have a non-credit option and a credit options for students that need to get the full-time financial aid credit.
So far, we can't do any mirroring here. Are you mirroring in your non-credit?
We haven't got there. No, that's my
We're still
plan.
working
So,
on it.
and the reason that you can't do mirroring,
Well, we weren't allowed to mirror when we presented that.
Right.
because
That's
we
another discussion.
currently, so we do, our EMLS core program is completely mirrored. And so I believe the way they're structuring is a student can sit in either course. They just have to make sure if they've registered for the non-credit, that's accounted for differently. And because it's going to be part of CDCP, we will get full apportionment.
Yeah, we have a few mirrored courses, as Sarah knows
Okay.
better than I do, but we aren't adding new ones at this point.
Okay.
Why-
So
why-
and we're
what's the
just
policy?
dabbling.
I think that's changing, but yeah, it's
And we're afraid we're gonna get audited and
for
we're gonna come back out.
That's our interpretation
fear
of
that
the policy.
I guess someone else was getting audited and it got hit hard for that.
For mirroring.
But it seems like this.
But the
kind of
Pecans
thing,
and the
in
Pecan
terms of
Title V is
college
very
prep,
clear.
would be an
I know, I
easier
don't-
sell.
Okay.
It would be an easier sell if it's college prep, I think. Don't you think?
Yeah, I think so.
And our philosophy is we want to just get something and get it started, because we can do analysis paralysis and still be analyzing in 3 years and never have the course. If we listen to our students in our focus groups, what we know from counseling and what we know from students will take this course. There's people that say they won't take anything for credit. Show me the information, show me the data. Well, we don't operate on credit, so how can you tell me that? That's what you might have done, but we don't know what our students today. So let's try it. If we try it as non-credit and it doesn't fill, we've got data. I'm fine with that, but I don't operate off of, I like to operate in the unknown, but not from the standpoint that you can't prove it to me. So that's really what in many committees I throw back out to faculty is we need to try something. So try it for both, but at some point we need to get moving. I was going to say the other analogy. It's not appropriate. But you know where I was going. But we need to get going because in the meantime, we have students that aren't being served, and we have a great plan that really can serve our students. So I'm a risk taker. Let's try it. I'm okay with failure. I learn from that. So
Yeah, and it's interesting because the different teams are doing things very differently. Like, so the STEM team, we're not really even talking about the pathway class. We kind of set that aside for a while because there's a lot of faculty who are just very much against it. We'll return to that later. What we're looking at is because STEM is such high drop rates, it's a matter of what's going on that is causing half of the students to drop within the first month of the semester, right? And so we're focusing a lot on communicating what the STEM pathway is really about, what the career options are. So many students, I know when I went to college, I was a chemical engineering major. I had no idea what that meant. I was a girl who was good at math, and people said, go do that, you'll make good money. And I went to college having no idea what the requirements were for that job. And a lot of our students are like that. So in STEM, it's a matter of how do we connect with students to actually have meaningful contact with them, because they already get too many emails that they don't read, right? They don't check their emails. Can we contact them through text? What do we have to do in order to get those sorts of permissions? When they go to drop a class, one thing that we've been working on is designing, can we get a little drop box that when they go to withdraw, just a drop box that says, we're sorry to see you leave. We've all seen those survey emails. We're sorry that you've chosen to drop this class. Can you tell us why? And just a couple of options. Is it because of your work schedule? Is it because you're changing major? Just so we can start to collect the information that we need so that then we can start making educated choices about what we're doing with these students. So every pathway has been different.
So I have two questions. One is about the community, but one is about the class you were just talking about. So you were saying it was team taught, or
we haven't done it. We're just it's
you're
not true.
thinking it through. Team taught at our college is seen as negative because you're paying two people to teach a class, and then that's sort of a problem. Yesterday I was at the Strength and Student Success Conference, and San Mateo talked about a course they developed that's not similar, that's similar. And they decided to make it interdisciplinary and not put it in any specific department. They made it such that anybody with a master's can teach it. That was so they didn't have to do all the components. Anybody with a master's can teach it. And then one teacher teaches it, but they have professional development to train the faculty on all the different aspects of that course so that they can then teach it effectively. And so that was a model that they were talking about. The second question was this one here. I guess that wasn't a question, but I have a question about this slide. So these are the different the different roles and the different backgrounds that people have that are in this community. When I see the arrows, I'm thinking like a student goes through this process, or is this not a process by the arrows?
We do kind of connect students. So, for example, Steve Waller sent a student to my office a couple of weeks ago because she was struggling in one of her classes and wanted to work with someone on, just refining her study skills. So he said, go meet with Jessica. She came to my office hours and we got on it. So, but I think more this was just
it's just more showing maybe it's all inclusive.
Okay.
Maybe double-ended arrows would be a better depiction because how we are utilizing it is no matter what entrance point a student makes contact, depending on the problem, they have a name and a phone number instead of go over there. That's really been that intentional communication piece. And we even go to, do you know where that is? Let me walk you over. So that's really the philosophy of think of and it really comes from the perspective of coaching. Think of a coach. What do your athletic coaches do, or even a business coach or a coach? They really help you through the process. You come to them, they help you problem solve. And that's us making students, putting them in touch with. So if a student comes to me and I know what I know, but then financial aid, I know a little bit, but I'll either let me get back to you, or let me see if Lucy is my person, my financial aid advisor is Lucy. Let me see if Lucy's available. Here's her contact number and email. Email her and I will reach out as well. So that if the student doesn't follow through, I have, and then I can come back and close the loop. So it's really intentional on making sure students access what they need.
I just wanted to throw out an idea for us with regard to our CG1 class. This is a 3-unit UC and CSU transferable course that meets Area E for RGE as well as CSU GE. That does cover some career exploration, that does cover some educational pathway stuff and developing ed plans. And I'm wondering if, just as a starting point of an idea for this kind of a class, I mean, we might consider taking that through whatever curriculum changes we would need to do, such that we wouldn't lose any of that transferability or GE placement, but maybe be able to add in a team taught component that gives an overview of whatever that particular discipline. I think we're leaning towards 6 different pathways.
Well, we currently can say this is focused on this, I mean, we have English classes that say this is focusing on.
At the section level.
At the section
Yeah.
level, so we could do that, just starting off with this focusing on.
Sure,
sections,
we
focusing
would just
on-
have to look at the wording of the
Right.
current outline to see if it allows for broad
That
enough,
could be a place just to start.
you know, because to me, we're really close to that, and I like the idea, I'm trying to break away from just my own preconceived notions about it, but I like the idea, and I would think that a student would like the idea that if they're gonna put that kind of time and effort in on a course, that they would like to get some usable units out of that, which
So,
is an argument for the
yes.
credit side versus the non-credit
So here's a
side.
couple of things for us if they get the student ed plan matriculation step, check. But the other thing to think about the core, and I think this is where when we say it's a career exploration course, it isn't. It's more than that. It is an introduction to all of the programs within a
Sure.
pathway.
Oh, yeah.
Included in that is similar to what Jessica was saying, is some aptitude testing. So you might have chosen to do the ag pathway and get information about that, but when you do some testing and we discuss test results, it really says that you are really good at math. You might consider some of the STEM degrees.
An equally good outcome.
Right.
It might be the
Therefore-
path they thought, but it might be a different
Absolutely,
direction.
and that's one of the pieces of information where students say, I thought I wanted to do X, but now I'm doing Y because I didn't know. And so it's about providing that information. And then it's not a class of guest speakers either. It would be nice to have them come in, but our discussion was, in our pathway at least, we have nurses, we have kinesiologists, we have physical therapists, we have these people that teach on campus. Let's use our faculty as a guest speaker. So the team teaching piece for us is not a 50-50. You can do it a couple of ways. You could load somebody that you do 50%, you do 50%. You could do all of it with people coming in as guest lecturers voluntarily. You could do it as we have another class similar to what you described where it's taught by a person and then other people get like release time to come and do their very specific. And that ends up being very, very minute for 2 hours, you know, unless you're doing it multiple times. So those are definitely things to think about in that structure. Start with your student learning outcomes. What is your outcome? And then structure your outline and your activities, very directed learning activities, not just a la-di-da kind of a class. And we've also talked about, even in our pathway, is incorporating some of that student support, that how to study strategies, how to test take, some of those basic student success for our students as first gen. And a statement I tell my students all the time is, it's not that you are not, that you're stupid. I used to flat out say, it's not that you're stupid. Somebody may have told you that. The reality is many people have not been taught how to learn. So you're capable. So you need to believe that you're capable. And then our goal is to now teach you how to learn so that as you move through your educational journey, you have the right skill set. And then that kind of, it's that whole changing them from a fixed mindset, it really starts to change their perspective about, oh, maybe I can. And they get in a class like this, they get into maybe an accelerated class where there's success, and that then begins to build upon success. And I think being very cognizant and intentional in setting our students up for success instead of this math bill that, in my mind, is what I know, might be setting them up for failure. And so how is that helpful?
What's the math bill you're reviewing?
AB 705.
I don't know what that is.
it's sitting on Jerry Brown's desk, right now. It's supposed to be, we're supposed to know by Sunday whether he's gonna sign it or not.
Okay.
You were asking a question, right?
Well, you mentioned the math thing, I just,
He said, what was our math failure rate?
That's what she's talking about.
Math bill.
Oh, okay.
I don't know, but what is it?
So, Amy.
She just educated me a few minutes ago and obviously got me going.
It's a big
Yeah,
deal.
do you wanna explain what you're coming up with?
It came up at our last, well, I mean, it had come up before in an email, but essentially that we can't have students in basic skills classes. Comes down to that. We have to let them enroll in transfer level courses unless we have data to prove that they are actually benefiting by taking these extra courses.
So it's not a big surprise, right, given the CSU
goes back to
change.
how it was when I first started, I mean, just is, and how
Yes and
wonderful that
no,
was.
I mean, it's right to fail, but I mean, it's sort of our job to help them not fail. And
Right.
so
Sure, of
we're
course.
trying to do, well, we're looking into what Kuyamaka is doing, and they sort of adopted that already, where their students don't have to take basic skills courses. So if they decide to take, let's say, stats, then there's a stats course that comes with the co-rec, and their success rate seems phenomenal.
Did they all, as a prerequisite to that stats course?
So that's what the co-rec takes care of. When students don't have the math that they need, that co-rec part of it takes care of it.
And that's a credit, correct?
And English is doing that as well.
Again, I'm going to an institute at the end of the month, but my understanding is yes, the regular
Credit
students,
card.
instead of doing 5-unit stats course, they do a 8-unit stats with co-rec course. It's taught by the same instructor, and again, it's their data that they're showing shows phenomenal
Great.
success.
So I just looked up AB 705, it requires multiple measure placement, and acceleration. It's both of those things. So, it's the things that people have been working on, but now the legislature got into it and said, thou shalt. And if people aren't sure what Jerry Brown's gonna do, what I heard at the conference was that it looks like he was gonna sign it, but people don't know yet.
And what's the number one more time?
Uh,
Eight something?
AB 705,
And there's money attached to it.
and there's money, yeah, and there's money for it.
So that would be for.
So that is gonna change, it may change math's plans.
Right.
And it also, I mean, part of the guided pathways model also is asking us to look at, and I'll be curious if you guys have done this so far, what math do you actually need for what careers?
Yeah.
And how much, we have a little bit of that here, right, with the different stats. You have 3 different stats classes that you can take. But this is sort of seriously looking at working backwards from the career, that people, what math do you really need? And so it's kind of a revolution, it's a statewide revolution in thinking about math, for which there are people adamantly on both sides.
So the counseling department had a meeting with Jamie, and they even talked about that meeting we had where looking at the prereqs for math, for chemistry, for biology.
Right.
Right,
Because
Yeah,
what's
that's-
there right now
Prereq
may
to
or may not be
prereq.
what's appropriate.
right.
May or may not match.
And
Correct.
I talked to somebody who told me that at his college, what they did was they took the competencies at the end of each math class and listed them without naming the class, and then gave it to the chemistry faculty, the bio faculty, to sociology faculty, and said, which one of these do you really need? And it wasn't what the prereqs were
Wow.
at all. So they changed it.
That's
Can we get a
great
copy?
activity.
Do they have that written up? We could look at it?
No,
I mean, that'd be very
this was a whisper in my ear, Marcy, here's how to do it.
I think it's Becky, did you have a comment, and then we'll go back here?
Well, I was kind of, you already kind of talked about it, but in terms of like that, CCG.
Oh, the CG one.
class.
Oh, yeah.
And it just brings back when I started graduate school, we had a course for all first semester graduate students where the faculty would rotate through and you'd read an article that they wrote and then they'd come in and talk for homework and then they'd come in and talk about what they do. So that you got a sense of what your entire department does. And we were all like kings in a candy store.
Yeah.
Like, I want to work with that guy. No, I want to work with her. And so it seems to me, and building off of Jay's comment, that could it, as what we could do here, like take that counseling you guys do the stuff that you normally do with them, that us faculty may not be familiar with, but then add into that, within that guided pathway, like one speaker, one day or 2 days had,
Perfect.
the psych department.
Run with it.
And the next day had the sociology department, and one person from each of the majors within that meta major.
And what you're gonna get are people trying to sell, look, English is really cool. I really
Which is
think
fine.
that
Yep,
goes
there you
in.
go.
Well, no, communications is better, you really.
Well, I know Lauren and Christina already do that with the STEM,
It's-
content.
Yeah, and just so we're clear, that they're doing that in CG 51, which is a 1 unit one.
Okay,
Much of that content in the 51 1 unit is also in the one, so CG 1, which is a 3 unit course.
Right.
And just in terms of resources, it's a matter of shifting. We do a ton of the 51s right now, requiring it with lowercase r for incoming freshmen. But shifting some of those resources from 51 into offering fewer sections of that and more sections of the
And,
one.
and we need to think about the unit thing, because we just got our statistics from the California Pathways Project, which at the conference, Student Success Conference, people are calling themselves, we're part of the California 20. So yes, we're part of the, Cabrillo is part of the California 20. Of how many units students take in the last year, the graduates that we had, in what majors, how many units they took. And we really need to look at that data carefully, because the units are really high, and we have some questions. We're waiting on answers from Terrence for about how many of these were degree applicable units, how many of these were.
Well, that's why it's important that it be meeting something for them, because to require somebody to do that same amount of work, but not get any units for it, so that we can lower our perspective of, well, now we're keeping it under 60 units, but we're still making you do 63 units worth of work. I have some issues, looking at it from that angle. So,
Right.
and the way to resolve that is to make sure that it's clearing something for them, that it is meeting a requirement.
Right. And all of this, we need to keep asking the students, keep talking to the
Yeah.
students, keep talking to the students. So we've interrupted you for a long
no,
time.
oh no, this is great.
What we
This
wanted.
is-
Okay, all right.
Any more questions on completion coaching community?
Just, yeah, it's a totally different one. So back to that data coach,
Uh-huh.
you mentioned it was somebody that had volunteered, so it's not somebody from the research office, just somebody that's good with.
So there's a data coach mentor, so to speak, and they train the data coaches. So anybody who's interested in the data, and I believe it's Janet,
Janet,
is our data, she was the dean at the time, but she's still taking on that role. And so she would go in, anybody interested, really talking about how to use the resources that we have available to gather and grab data. And part of their role on the completion coaching team is to ask the team that phrase, what question are you trying to answer? Because you might say, oh, I want to know how many students are this. What question are you trying to answer? So that we actually, because we have access to so much information, but we need to make it meaningful and useful, and really going back in a little bit of that research mode. What question are you trying to answer? So that is their role, is to help you get that information to answer a question or to solve a problem. If you have a problem, what are you seeing? The whole, why are students dropping out in the first semester in the STEM math pathway? That's a great question, but we need some information. We need to gather the data. If we don't have it, then what is our next step? How do we begin to develop it? And so that's where your data coach comes into play.
So it sounds like it's an achieving the dream type of data coach, because they're usually higher level, they're not really detailed IR people at all.
And my understanding is I'm thinking achieving the dream. We were part of the National Pathways Project that California somewhat adopted the structure. And in that project, at the very tail end, I think their last meeting is next week, they are now trying to really integrate achieving the dream with pathways and their coaches and their structure. So that moving forward, you're not doing two things over here that are somewhat paralleling. So that's why you may be seeing some terminology crossing over.
And actually, Achieving the Dream has been very interested in support of guided pathways. The Dream Conference this year is in Tennessee, but they're going to do a fairly large guided pathways piece, and they know that California's at the forefront. So I was on the phone with Karen Stout about a week ago, and she wants to plan kind of a mini dream in California this year and really focus on guided pathways. And then they're looking at Long Beach potentially
what more advice can you give us and tell us
So
about?
let's fast forward to our lessons learned. Oh, we can quickly,
Yeah, just more data.
quickly on our momentum points, some things to think about, which is coming out of the Guided Pathways project, is what are the momentum points? And we've had long discussions in how do you reach students? Do you have a system that does an early alert, that sends that text? There's some great colleges that have structure out there that notify students of their momentum points. And the data is showing that these are the points where we start to lose students. So we've identified what students need to do that enhances their success. One is college math and English in the first year. So when we talk about those SEPs, whether they're pathway or abbreviated or full, they should have a college level English and math in their first year. As curriculum, I just had a new program come through, adding these momentum points as the lens. So the comment back to the faculty was, make sure you have English and math in the first year. And the other one is, it's not on here, is at least 6 to 9 units in their major. So that captures that student. So that is where we're really looking at what's going to be the hook to grab them, to keep them on that trajectory of success. 15 units by the end of the first semester, 30 units by the end of the second semester. So there's research and data that shows these are appropriate momentum points, and they do improve student success. And then, again, trying to hit that 60 unit max. So those are some things to think about. What are your SEPs looking at? What we did is all the pathways, completion coaching teams, they sat at a table and every program had their student ed plans for that program and started with this discussion to start to find how can we hit these momentum points. And in doing so, in a pathway like health sciences, a student could take the first year of prerequisites before they would have to decide, do I want to be a nurse? Do I want to go into public health science? Or do I want to go into kinesiology? That's how similar that first year is. And that's huge because, I don't know, you guys have a nursing program, correct?
Yeah.
You do. Nursing. We have 4,000 declared majors for 60 spots. That's the reality. So part of our motivation is, okay, are you really supposed to be a nurse? You don't want to find that the first semester of the program. And what are your other options? And sometimes because they've never explored, I just had a student say to me, you know, I really don't like the caring, touching thing.
Administrator.
That is not me. And so it's like, I have a program for you. Go into public health science. You get to work with patients in a community role. You still get to do the nursing kinds of things from a little different perspective. You have to touch people. So it's really that great, you know, just by making that statement, the students like, you know, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm just kind of hopeless. No, it's not, because they didn't know there was an option. It's always nursing. Everybody's going into nursing. Well, no, we don't need everybody going into
What
nursing.
kind of weight do you have for your nursing program?
So we don't do a wait list. It takes approximately, we're doing lottery, it takes approximately a year before a student gets in.
That's better than us.
So, and we have 60
We don't do a
seats.
wait list anymore.
We have 60 seats, and we get between 300 and 400 qualified applicants. So that number rolls through, usually in anywhere from 2 to 3 semesters. There's a few 4-semester outliers out there, but usually within 3 semesters. And we take in every semester a class of 60 to 68.
Okay, so that's, yeah, okay.
Yeah, Anna, did you?
I do, just about this, because now I'm thinking, and this is less for you guys, maybe, but for the whole group, is like with all this acceleration, so we're saying a student takes an 8-unit statistics class, a 6-unit English class, and 9 units in the major. How would that even work with this new kind of system that we're talking about? Because you can't do that, right? I mean, so.
In the first year.
In a year.
But in the first
Year.
In the first year.
So that would work in the first
So
year.
that's- okay.
Yes.
And these are, I mean, they're aggressive goals for
They
students
are,
anyway,
yeah,
you know,
They
and
are.
I mean, we have had a tough time just getting
Part-time.
students to do
It's real.
full-time with 12. But one thing that we found, and this really required a lot of data work, like we thought our students needed to be part-time, that they needed to work. But then we looked at our students when they're transferring, they transfer in as full-time students, right? And so, you know, there's something happening where maybe we weren't encouraging them enough to see the advantages of being full-time. right? Yes, there's going to be some who have to be part-time, but do all the students who are currently part-time have to be part-time?
And what are you
Probably not.
finding out? I mean, what are you, you're
We're not
asking the
there yet.
question, have you got any, answers? Cause I think we're up against that same question.
This is new for us.
Yeah,
This
we
is
haven't
like
got there
this
yet.
semester. So we'll be looking at this over the next year.
And then the
Students
other
I
thing
know
is
are-
actually having the discussion back to completion coaching team. So counselors, we understand, our counselors get 30 minutes with the student. So if I'm seeing a student come to my office hours, I can do a group discussion about, let's consider, do you need to be full-time or part-time? What helps you make that decision? It doesn't have to be a counselor. So that's that completion coaching team of sharing the workload. It's not, it's voluntary. I know what it takes in my discipline. I can talk about, well, you know, when you transfer, I will have students that will say, I'm going one step at a time while I'm saving my money. And then I know right at the end when I need to buck it up and get prepared for the program, I'm taking a full load of sciences, I'm then gonna apply and I'll be ready to go. They had a plan.
How many of you worked full-time while you were a student? I know I did. I had 3 jobs my senior year. And I was still full-time because I wanted to finish on time.
We're 32 hours a week, but that's not full-time.
I don't know, I think we see a lot of
It's close.
stress in those people carrying full-time jobs and a full course load. There's a lot of stress there.
Right,
There
but
is.
there
There
are
is.
things, but there are things that we can do.
So here's your
Right.
financial aid
How do you
person.
support them?
Have you applied for scholarship? Oh no, it takes too much time. Oh no, we're gonna do that right now.
So can I just follow up with really the promise, I think, of my question was, they're gonna be doing more than 60 units with the exploration courses, right? I mean, we're really
Not if we
looking
make the exploration, not if we design it correctly, not necessarily. If part of that is your CG1 class, includes your exploration.
Like 8 unit statistics with the.
Right,
the
and now
extra
they're not
that-
having to do 4 semesters to get there, so
Right.
instead of doing
Right.
254
That should cut
A,
down there.
It's
it's
still
gonna
gonna
be
cut it down, but it's
154,
still
152, and then staff, then
Yeah.
they'll get there with less students.
So
And then
that's-
if they
that's-
fail once or twice.
And that's great. Keeping that in your forefront of your mind because you want to track it. Because this may not work. It's aggressive, but what we have to figure out, is this too aggressive? Or do we need to tweak our communication to our students to make it aggressive and for them to be successful? Because again, I don't want a student taking 15 units and failing 9 of them.
Right.
So it's really having that conversation, and so I will have a student, so tell me a little bit about your work, tell me a little bit about what kind of student you are, and be honest with me. Do you study the amount of time, 2 hours outside, 1 hour for every class, and every time you're sitting in a seat? And if you tell me no, then I'm gonna advise you not to take these 2 sciences together. And the student's like, oh, okay, that helps me make a decision. I think that's a role. That's the completion coaching.
And at least we can be upfront. So if you're gonna take 12 units instead of 15, it's gonna take
Take
you
you
3
longer.
years
Yeah.
to get through. Let me just tell you that up front. If that's okay with you, fine.
Like his choices.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I think we haven't been upfront about all.
All day.
I know you do. And see, that's where counselors are like, yes, somebody support us. And it's
Right,
sharing the
but
wealth.
Would you like faculty to be reinforcing that for you? too?
Absolutely, that's
Yeah.
why we love this whole thing, because it's what we've been clamoring about for
Years.
our entire career.
That's how our counselors were too.
Yeah.
Yes, finally.
So is BC a promise college yet?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so that's another thing that we have, that we're working towards, is becoming a promise college. Would you explain what that means?
I'm not.
Do you know what that
Okay,
is?
so,
I know, but what they
I
do
will,
is-
I'll take a stab and you can chime in.
Okay.
So we have created a promise to our students that if they come in and there's criteria for them upon admission, that we will guarantee they will be out ready to transfer in 2 years, whether it's within a terminal associate degree or a transfer degree. And the group of promise students, they are multiple measured, so they actually get into the correct placement. They are provided additional academic support. Similar to a completion coaching team up front, they become an affinity group, so they are provided what we're talking about now, we're trying to do to the masses. This group will receive that kind of information, the ed planning, and then they are tracked. And it's my understanding we haven't really had to reserve seats. So let's say we have a promise student that wants to be nursing. I don't believe nursing is even a major that they have an option of choosing because of our high unit major. It's not a 2-year promise that we can keep unless they came in with a bunch of AP ahead of the
But
game.
they have to be college ready, they have to participate in an orientation, they have to maintain a certain GPA.
Mhm.
And at Skyline College, they don't pay tuition. They have to be willing to go full-time and they don't have to pay
And
tuition.
who's supporting that, who's supporting that?
There are ways to do that, and our foundation is working on it, so that the goal is that we will become a Promise College by fall 2018.
How many students does Bakersfield have in that program?
Our promise, is it 50 maybe?
It's not.
It's not a real large group, because I think this fall, right now, is our first promise group. They spent the spring, going to the high schools, talking about who'd be eligible. They spent all summer evaluating their applications, reaching out to them, getting them on board, having them attend Summer Bridge. They had a long orientation. So this is, and I want to think it's 50. That's a number that's sitting in. So it's a small group to start with. I think that's manageable to track, because think of the tracking nightmare.
Right.
I consider it a nightmare.
So let me go back to Anna's question, and this is the last slide.
Mhm.
And it's
Yeah.
part of this promise thing. This promise is that you'll be out in 2
2 years.
years, 60 units. It seems like the first 3 bullets are doable. The fourth bullet is the one that's the issue. So it seems like there's 3 types of students. One that knows what degree they want. So I mean, getting that done would probably fit well. The second is they want to do I want a social sciences or humanities student. Then you have the meta major student. And then the third student is one that doesn't know what they want to do. I mean, I didn't graduate with my bachelor's till I was 28 because I didn't know what the hell I wanted to do. And that student, it seems like would be, especially if they switch meta majors, but if you were strategic enough to make it such that they don't lose any momentum, I mean, that.
So if you think about one of the discussions in our meta majors is when I mentioned in health sciences how they could take that first year. That's actually a discussion in all of we call them learning and career pathways, in the completion coaching team for those pathways, that they have a discussion about entering the path and what are those common core courses. So a student could be a social science and in a year, have a year to make a decision before they declare major, and now they have 5 core courses that they take and they get their ADT.
But they're still the same meta major.
They're still in the pathway. They're still in the same pathway.
Right.
Yeah, you're
And
talking about even
If
jumping.
they
pathways.
jump, like
So that is one of those financial aid and advising components. You can jump. I don't think for promise students they really. I don't know how they're addressing that.
Yeah,
If they stay as the promise student, I do know that the promise students did receive some of that aptitude testing to help them make better decisions about what their ed plan looked like and what their career choices would be. And we're doing it with starting with the career in mind, with the end in mind. So they really start the discussion of what kind of work do you want to do? And then let's back it up with what degree would allow you to achieve that outcome.
So this class that you're talking about, where does your orientation come in? Because I've heard really great things about your 5-day orientation that all students go through. Like, how does that fit into?
So that's Summer Bridge, and they take that. So think of this, that this is really addressing initially the rollout would be for incoming students. They don't have to be freshmen, but first-time college students. And they would take Summer Bridge. And Summer Bridge does, and I don't think Summer Bridge is a 5-day,
It's not
it's a-
anymore. Summer Bridge has gone through several iterations. It used to be multi-day. Over the last 2 summers, we've switched it to 1 day. It's a really long day. It's a 7:30 in the morning to 5 p.m. day. But the reason we switched to 1 day was because we had too many students who would show up for day 1 of orientation and not show up for the 2nd or 3rd day. And then it's like, what do you do with those students? Do you fail them? And then they start their college career with an F. That's not what we want. So we've done a lot of work with that, the scheduling of that day, and we're still tweaking it. But we've managed to fit in all of the core things that really we wanted to get done with them: the tour, meeting with a counselor, going over SEP, learning how to buy your books, reading your schedule, that sort of thing, in 1 day.
Well, I thought your orientation had affective and non-cognitive stuff, and that really built the student, not just a. Like where the bookstore and
We
bathrooms
still
are
do
and stuff.
some of that, but I think that's more in our outreach. And so in high school outreach program is doing more of that.
You don't have a 5-day orientation.
We do have Summer Bridge.
Summer Bridge, and that's really a college orientation, helping you get started. So the first day you're not during the advice work.
And when is that in the summer? Is it?
All summer long.
So you have lots of.
Oh yeah,
That people are.
it's
Local
probably
sections.
3 times a week.
4 times, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and all week
All-
over
all
the summer. We don't actually run it during the 6-week period, where the 6 week where most people are taking their classes, because we want to encourage students to take summer bridge and a class during the summer. So during those 6 weeks, there's sometimes there's been Friday or Saturday bridges. But the weeks before, so that 5 weeks before the 6-week session starts, and then 3 or 4 weeks after that's when most of the bridge students.
And then how many students per session about?
It depends. We've slowly grown it, so at most we've looked at like 40 to 45 students. Now that is summer bridge is taught by 2 lead faculty, and then we also have faculty counselors who sit at the table with students. So it's crescent rounds where you have a round table of maybe 6 students. We assign them to sit with a faculty member, and then you have the 2 leads who are facilitating the activities all day.
So 40 to 45 students each session, and approximately how many sessions, how many students do you get to reach that?
This summer, it was our highest number yet. We hit almost 1,100 students.
Oh, impressive.
Yeah, the big challenge for us is, do we have enough faculty
Yeah.
to support, and there's just space. I mean, we have one room that's essentially this size. How would we run a second?
Are faculty compensated for that?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a class.
Yes,
That's community.
they get
It's
half
half unit. And they have actual assignments they have to complete over the course of the day. So it's a chance to show them Canvas, our learning management system. They put in assignments through there.
And the beauty of that, and that's where we're thinking of going with our course, is then to take the intro to college, that piece, connected with the CG, whatever type of a
Right,
course.
right.
And then if that went to 2.5 plus their half unit, there's your 3. And transferable, we had not yet moved there. We do have a student development B6 that does similar to what you said, that's CSU UC transferable. So I understand where you're going with students getting something out of it, something to ponder.
So let's go to lessons
Okay.
learned,
All right,
just
let's
only because hopefully more people will be coming at 11, and you might want to rest your voices for a few minutes before you talk about
Faculty like to talk.
Yeah.
What do you know? There you go. So our lessons learned, faculty engagement is mission critical. So you've started the process. As you continue your pillar work, continue pulling in people. Anybody and we try to pull in skeptics.
Yeah, we are too.
They're skeptical, so there you go. But you try to get your skeptics there. Because you don't have to sell me on it. And I tell people, I'm not trying to sell you a product. I am not a salesperson. I am not getting you to buy in. Those are the telemarketers. What I'm trying to get you to do is engage. Because if you engage in the process, I believe then a rollout is much more effective, and you can then take that engagement to your students at the student level.
And I hate to admit to it, but often a faculty voice will work where other voices don't. Our first institute for Guided Pathways a couple of years ago, it was led really by our director of Triple SP at Equity. She is wonderful. She's articulate. She's super smart. And a lot of faculty just responded very negatively because it was her, and they saw it as administration telling them what to do. And so having faculty who are willing to advocate on behalf of Guided Pathways to other faculty, I think is pretty important. And she will not talk about Guided Pathways without having a faculty member with her.
Be sure to involve the academic senate. That's our skeptic. One of our skeptics is our academic senate president.
Our leaders.
So the involvement was, hey, this is what's going on with Pathways, but because it wasn't more intentional and really bringing that person into the fold, we didn't have quite the same momentum support from the Senate. And so then you can start, I use a phrase, negativity brings negativity, and you started some of that breeding, and it's more the fear of the unknown. But we don't know. So I've already told you, I'm a risk taker, so what? We don't know. It's all right. But there's not a lot of people where that's okay. So just kind of what I believe I have as a pulse on the faculty, my colleagues, having a pulse, so knowing who I'm talking to and how when I need to recognize that I'm on board but you're not, so let's change how we have the discussion on me not trying to tell you why it's so great, but you tell me what you're concerned about and let's try to talk through your concerns and see if we can arrive at a solution. And can I get you to test one thing for me? And then I pester people. So be sure to involve the Senate. Consider collegial integration of knowledge and experience. So that's our completion coaching team. We really, we recognize our staff, they may not be faculty, but they may have a lot of knowledge. They deal with a lot of, think of the face of some of the people that in an admissions and records office and how they deal with the students. And they can say, oh no, this is what I hear, because they have a perspective. So that's what I love about completion coaching teams. communicate to all constituents. That communication plan that Jessica mentioned is very important, and we talked even last night. I said, it does not, I've had people that say, oh, now I don't even know what you're talking about. Okay, so you go back to our timeline, 2013. You attended the campus-wide presentation. Okay, cynical mind goes, wonderful, no problem, let's talk about this. Because it does not matter how many times we say it, you will still have people. What I've realized is they weren't ready to hear, therefore they didn't. Just like we learn in communication, they heard, but they weren't listening. So when it's time for them to listen, now it's time to be all in and get the hook and get them involved.
I really think uniform language, uniform terms is important. Our communication plan now, we put together an email to send out to all the faculty. I wrote a speech that students can share in the classroom. We'll be going class to class and just talking about one particular aspect of guided pathways, because we don't really use the term guided pathways with students. They don't know what that means, right? But there's a different way of communicating this to faculty. But just using terms of, like, we used interchangeably meta majors, pathways, learning and career math pathways, and even that, for those of us who are in it, we're fine doing that. People who aren't in it, they get confused. They're like, why are you using all these different terms? And so for us, it's just realizing we needed to be more intentional in our message and clear to those who are kind of on the periphery. Those who I think would be interested and are interested. They're not, negative, but it's just
Start
confusing.
ready.
Yeah, that's where. Questions.
We've got some of those.
And we are still going to continue to learn lessons. Nature the beast. Any last comments, questions? There we go.
It was sparked by Diego's question earlier, and I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page with it. My understanding of our approach to this meta major is that it's for the undeclared student as a temporary 1 semester, maybe 2 semester landing spot to help them figure out where they want to be going. And then they go from that into a major. Not that it's the place that they're landing and staying, but the whole goal is to get them in, exposed, thinking new things, and then moving out into a major.
Correct.
Okay.
And I enjoyed hearing you call those meta majors pathways.
Yes.
Actually, I think that
Learning
sums
and
up
career
some.
pathways.
We call them
Yeah.
learning, and that's my pet peeve, because the feedback from faculty and students was, what is this a major above majors? Is this the big major that you declare? Do you declare meta major?
Right.
So there were so many questions. Again, some of us it was like a moot point. It's just a term. Some people felt that term had a different meaning. So we as faculty landed on learning and career pathways. So back to the messaging, trying to use the same term. So when people say meta major, if I can kick you, I will, because you're supposed to say learning and career pathways. I think for a student, that's clear.
So right now, in case you aren't aware of it, we're in the process of trying the departments are voting on what term they want to use. And there are 6 of them that were sent out.
That's why
And
I
learning and career
call it
pathways.
a bunch of different things, because I'm
Right.
sure we're related.
And for right now, we're just using the abbreviation meta major.
And Mount SAC allowed students to name them,
Yes,
and they're
we
very
have
interesting.
students are naming them. We're in the process of taking a vote on that too. I don't know how many, last week we had 255 students that weighed in on what they wanted. But we're going till the end of the month.
One of the things that I've heard from colleges that, not names of the meta major, but what a meta major is, they call them houses. Because you have Cambridge, you have Harvard, you have UC Santa
Right.
Cruz. And houses is something that's a liberal arts education perspective.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't like that one.
Yeah,
See,
that
to me,
was.
it sounds like a landing spot where you're gonna be for a long time in a house, as opposed
It's a
to
big
house.
investment,
Like
yeah,
a big
exactly. To get to.
That was
And
a
then
big
your
concern
visual
for us.
makes a big
Yeah.
difference. So how are you?
So one of the things that I worry about in career learning
And career
pathways is that the major, when you map out the courses in the major, that's the pathway for the major. So using pathway, we might want to think about career and learning clusters, and then you get on your pathway of your major. So we'll see what our faculty.
And that's how the learning and career pathway would be health sciences. Then the programs within, and because students, even as a major, you declare a major, and you declare a transfer goal. I mean, the terminology is all out there. So what we have done is, if you have health sciences, under health sciences umbrella, which is the learning career pathway, you then have various programs, and that would be your nursing, public health science, kinesiology, and that's your major that you declare.
And this seems like a big difference between the faculty kind of administrative discussions of this versus student discussions.
Yeah.
So many, they don't even care about the major when they come to college. They care about what career what they want to do, right? Just tell me which classes to take so I can go be a firefighter. So.
Can we go back to your momentum points slide? For a second, let me see if I got this. Okay.
And this was from our Dean of Institutional Effectiveness, that office, kind of looking at the data, saying what are of our successful students, those who complete in a couple of years, what characteristics do they have in common? These are
And
the-
I just want to say one of the other things at the institute, the California Twenty Institute, is completion of 30 units by the end of the first year can include summer school.
Yeah, absolutely.
If we ever go back to intercession,
Which I wish we could.
any of those other things that we're doing besides carrying 15.
Wait, but this is not just any units, this is transfer, degree applicable units, correct?
Well, I mean, the enrollment in college level, that's going to subsume remediation
Mm-hmm.
for the majority of our students, because they do need it, but you're right.
Because,
I'm trying to think of a situation where you would be taking non-degree applicable units that wouldn't be remedial if you declared a major and had an ed plan.
that's very, very good on your behalf. I'm Isabel, by the way.
Hi, Isabel.
You're not, good enough.
So, because we are looking now at how many units, I knew who you were, how many units students complete for our when they graduate with a certain degree or certificate, that's our second institute homework, they accumulate a whole bunch. I mean, Anna is helping with this because she's a
I couldn't find the slide. There's actually a slide you can get out of CalPass. I couldn't ask the right question to develop that slide for you.
Yeah.
That is a slide that when you share that with your faculty, it is one of those like, okay, yeah, we need to do something.
Oh, wait a second, I didn't get that.
So
Where
basically,
did you go with that?
many students earn the degree, but end up with like 102 units instead of 60. So when we first looked in the pit crew at that data, we weren't sure, and Terrence and Anna are going to help us with this. What exactly is the extra units? And a big question for me was, so you come in and you have an ed plan. How are we tracking that you stay on course with that? Because you could end up being on an ed plan and taking 1 million units, and then you switch to something else, and then these units here are not applicable to anything else. I mean, so you're gonna graduate, yeah.
Yeah, so an example for that, the data coach for the STEM team pulled, it was earlier in the semester, wasn't it, where of our declared biology majors, like 40% of those who were declared were not taking any classes
In their major.
that semester. Right?
Where's
So
their ed
either-
plan?
So that either means, right, they declared biology, but that's not really their intended major, or they don't know what classes to take, but I mean, something's really wrong.
Speak.
Do you use CCC apply and can a student apply undeclared?
Yes, and I believe the answer is yes.
I'd have to go
But
through the
that's something,
291
we have a
options.
CCC apply slide in a little bit.
290?
For the,
It's like
yes,
291 options.
yeah, like the 90 plus options.
That's a great
Yeah.
exercise is to go, do you guys use CC apply for
Yeah.
students? So is to go in and see what it looks like.
And I know that there is an effort to make changes at the state level
Yes.
so that CC apply, instead of showing all the majors, would show your school's pathway.
Okay.
Yeah,
The
that's
map.
kind of what the question behind the question is. That's the place to be
That is,
capturing
and
and
they're
getting
doing
them
that.
on the
I
map.
believe Craig Hayward made
He is.
I believe Greg
Absolutely
Hayward
does.
is.
And I have
Very
a slide
active.
if you want to see what it looks
Yeah,
like.
yeah,
Yeah, I think we all are. We want to see it.
I understand.
Right, financially independent.
Maybe that
Welcome.
needs to change.
Hello, can I just add something about this, the big unit large for STEM students, let's just take on that. So somebody that's a biology major, that there may be semesters where calculus, biology, chemistry, and maybe physics. That's not really realistic, so 15 units, right? So you are putting in classes in there that maybe GE classes, but maybe the student really does enjoy ceramics, and that's gonna actually make them.
That's exactly what we did. So for the first year in STEM, we kind of mapped things out. We've got English, math. It was agreed that chemistry, because pretty much all of the majors except maybe physics requires chemistry, so they would take chemistry. And then the fourth class would be a gen ed, something fun, and encourage them to do
But so
something
outside
that's.
of gen ed, there may be even fun
Yeah.
classes.
So here's the conversation with that.
Yeah.
If your student is on financial aid, it is not paid for. So what I say to a student when I'm counseling a student is, it's $46 a unit times 3. If you're good with that, just know your financial aid won't cover this. But it might be enough to save your sanity, and it might be worth it. So that to me are the conversations that we have around ed plans instead of here's a piece of paper.
Right.
It's the plan piece.
So
I would say
let Claire be the last question, so you guys can get.
Oh, man,
You got to catch us later.
All right, all right.
She's my boss, you know.
we probably need to have this discussion in-house, but I think some of our skeptics, one of the skeptical perspectives would be that you really could get out of here in 60 minutes and get it all done.
That you could or can't.
Yeah, I think that's a place where we would need to
Come on in, have a seat.
We need to look at
investigate that 60
Yeah.
minutes and be convinced of it, or
Curriculum
be not
management, the
convinced of it, or
scheduling
whatever.
of classes.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
impacts everything.
So when you talked about, I'm going to quickly respond to that, was when you talk about that, one of the things to think about is what kind of a system do you have that would allow you to do predictive analytics for your scheduling? Because that's a piece where we are not yet, but that is a huge piece in keeping a promise. If you were going to create the promise to everybody and say our students can get out of here on time, how can you do that if they can't get the classes they need? That's predictive scheduling. And I'm not aware of anybody that's doing that. That's a huge issue. We're not yet ready to tackle it. But it needs to be done for this to work.
Well, but what we heard from College of San Mateo was, we tell the students we're a 2-year college, and you stick around for 7, 8 years and get nowhere. So there's a disconnect.
We want you 7 years and go somewhere.
That'd be an improvement, right?
Yeah,
And the
go
other thing
somewhere.
is when you were talking about communication, so it's just my boss here and 80% of me. And, what we get a lot is people who are really interested and want to march in this direction, 100 miles an hour. And it's just two of us, and what we really need is to spread that knowledge, because it can't just be, I used to work in Indiana, they would say, oh yeah, we have, oh yeah, so-and-so, check mark, done, right? So when you talk about your communication plan, I'd be interested in, yeah, that's it. Okay, and who exactly is doing the communicating? How wide is your circle? Yeah, okay.
So I want to let them, if they want to take a bio break, they've just been talking for an hour and a half, they're going to talk for another 2 hours. So, and there's food.
Where?
and we
Oh,
forgot
you
to
mean
bring
this?
you water.